On March 29 of 2018, I uploaded a video essay called Takagi-san Makes Me Happy. In this video I claimed that Takagi-san was my new favourite anime of all time, which I came to regret a week or so after uploading when I binged Suredure Children, and wondered if I preferred it over Takagi-san. That video essay ended with this statement. I'm thinking I might go in depth and properly analyse some stories from Takagi-san. So if you have any requests, please let me know in the comments, and if you want to see them when they come out, make sure you subscribe. A little over a week later, on April 7, I made a post on the Takagi-san subreddit saying that I wanted to analyse a few stories from the anime, and that my list consisted of 2-choice question, critical hit, and seating arrangement. But I also asked for suggestions, and boy oh boy did you guys deliver with the suggestions. This series that had 3 episodes planned became a behemoth of a project with 27 stories, 7 manga chapters and the OP analysed, as well as 3 video essays and a fan fiction, all making up over 5 hours of content. And now, at long last, we begin the final analysis of the series, seating arrangement, a story suggested by Party Force, Lucy Dragneil, Quality Internet Trash, and Hippo 202. This story is based on the manga's 21st chapter and can be found in episode 12 from 13 minutes and 34 seconds. Now you might be a little confused about that manga chapter number. 21? That seems pretty early. And it is. Seating arrangement being chapter 21 means it was published before English translation, ribs, calligraphy, tailing, cell phone, room, fortune telling, marathon, invitation, picture, water tap, critical hit, shopping, swimsuit, typhoon, 2-choice question, horror, first day of school, and portrait. There is a reason for this. Seating arrangement, as far as the manga was concerned, was never supposed to be this huge milestone chapter the same way that Critical Hit was. But the anime showrunners decided to repurpose this story and make it more important to the overall plot. The story begins in one of many anime-exclusive scenes. Nishikata is finishing up his 75 push-ups, meaning that he had been teased only 25 times that day. However, unlike any other time seeing him doing push-ups, this time he seems to be exercising with ease. When he finishes, he checks out the muscles on his arms and tells himself that his exercising is doing him good. He tries to do a handstand against his wardrobe door but loses balance and falls over, banging his knee against the door he was leaning on. Something worth mentioning here is that while he is doing his handstand, we see a POV shot of his room. Part of this shot is the status quo calligraphy that Takagi made him, which is fitting for this story given that their status quo is about to be threatened. He pulls up his pants leg to see if he has injured himself, and sure enough there is a small bruise where his knee hit the door. However, seeing an injury on his knee brings back a memory, specifically the memory of summer when he scraped it and Takagi had lent him her handkerchief to use as a bandage. He suddenly gets up and rifles through one of his drawers until he finds it. We cut to the school the following day. Nishikata walks down the hall with his hand in his pocket. Here we get into the first manga comparison, and arguably the most important, as it completely recontextualizes this particular story. In the manga, Nishikata is hiding a toy snake in his pocket and plans to scare Takagi with it during class. As a result, the entire story of the manga hinges on Nishikata's plan to scare Takagi, as opposed to his plan in the anime to return her handkerchief. He gets to the classroom door only to see that Takagi isn't in yet, but she arrives shortly after he does and says good morning, and Nishikata jumps. Takagi asks if he has heard the news. Nishikata asks what news, and Takagi informs him that there will be a seating arrangement change during homeroom. In the manga, he thinks to himself that he'll have to execute his plan during homeroom, but in the anime he feels his pocket and thinks about the handkerchief he has in there. He holds the handkerchief inside his pocket and tries to build the courage to give it back to her, but just as he goes to talk to her, she asks him what's wrong. Nishikata loses his nerve and changes the subject back to the seat change. He says that it should be fun given that they haven't had a seat change in a while. Takagi then says that she supposes it could be fun, but that she wishes she could have sat next to Nishikata just a little longer. As she says this, she wears an expression that is so sad it actually breaks my heart. Nishikata gets ready to be teased, but it never happens, and will not happen at all throughout this story. Takagi just continues to look upset over having to move seats. Now those of you who watch my Critical Hit Explain video, you'll have a pretty good idea as to why she is so upset over moving. She likes spending time with Nishikata, and moving to a different seat will mean she cannot see him nearly as often. It also means that her master plan will need to be executed more slowly than it already is, which would be a massive bummer after the giant leap forward that was Critical Hit. We cut to the beginning of homeroom with a diagram of the classroom on the board. Each desk space has a number on it. Tanabe tells his students that if they all have a lot, it's time to move to their new spots. Takagi enthusiastically asks what number Nishikata got, but that enthusiasm disappears when he tells her he got 29, putting him in the back corner. She tells him that she got the front center desk. She says that they're going to be pretty far apart before picking up her desk and walking towards the front of the room. On her way there, we see that Mina has scored a desk behind Yukari and is asking her to show test answers when the time comes. Nishikata gathers his things and begins walking to his new lot. Nakai approaches him and asks if he is putting his desk down there. Nishikata says no, and Nakai says it is a shame that they won't be closer. As they walk past each other, Nakai's desk brushes against Nishikata's pocket, and Nishikata remembers that he still has the handkerchief. As he realizes this, he can hear Nakai explain that his eyesight has been going downhill lately and that he hopes he can still see the board from all the way in the back. He arrives at his new lot and finds Mano laying face down on her desk looking upset. She looks up and glumly exclaims that Nishikata is her new desk neighbor. Nishikata asks what's up with her reaction, and Mano insists that he does not mind her, that she is just depressed about not being able to sit next to Nakai. Nishikata turns around and we see Nakai struggling to see the front of the room. He then looks over to Nishikata and waves. It is at this point that Kimura can be heard screaming from the front of the room. Turns out he drew lot 3, a desk in the middle of the front. He begs someone to swap seats with him because he cannot eat an early lunch if the teacher is right in front of him. King of early lunch Kimura indeed. Tanabe puts his hand on Kimura's shoulder and tells him that he won't let Kimura switch seats unless he has a proper reason, and that he'd also like to see Kimura in his office later. Nishikata thinks about what Kimura has just said. He realizes that his desk must be right next to Takagi's. He looks ahead and sees Takagi sitting on her own. A keen-eyed viewer will also notice Nakai and Kimura speaking to the left of her. In the manga, Nishikata thinks about how he really needs to get her with this snake. In the anime, he puts his hand into his pocket and holds the handkerchief again, before calling out to Kimura that he has bad eyesight, so would like to switch seats. However, Kimura tells him that he's already switched seats with someone else. Nishikata then lays on his desk, face down just like Mano, which has some interesting implications that I will save for later. But in the meantime, he tells himself that he doesn't care, something that even he doesn't seem to believe by this point. He opens his eyes when he hears Takagi's voice calling his name. He sits up and sees Takagi sitting in the seat next to him. She tells him that this is her seat now. Nishikata asks how that could be, and Takagi explains that Nakai switched seats with Kimura because he couldn't see the board, and Mano used her height as an excuse to switch with her. As Takagi explains this, we can see Nakai and Mano sitting next to each other and having a very fun-looking conversation. Takagi then asks Nishikata if he had tried to sit next to her earlier. Nishikata says that he just wanted to get closer to the board so he could see it properly. Takagi gets closer with a look of disbelief on her face. Nishikata insists that he is telling the truth, but Takagi isn't buying it. It is at this point that the story ends in the manga, with Takagi telling Nishikata that a toy snake will not frighten her, and Nishikata feeling disappointed that his planets failed. However, the anime still has a whole lot more story to get through. Tanabe begins his class, but as Takagi is pulling out her textbook, she asks Nishikata what he wanted to say earlier. She says it looks like he's had something to say all morning. Nishikata composes himself and finally pulls the handkerchief out of his pocket. He hands it to her while apologizing for holding onto it for so long. Takagi looks genuinely surprised to see it again. She asks if it was from summer and he says yes. He then goes to add something, but Takagi interjects by saying that it was also from their first day of school. Nishikata seems delightfully surprised that she remembers. Takagi asks if he remembers as well, and he makes a certain expression. An expression that says he is about to underplay or straight up deny this. And you'd be justified in thinking that's what he is about to do, given how often he does it throughout the series. He, as per usual, denies it. Nishikata denies that he was about to send Takagi a scary video. He says no, of course, but that he just thought that Nakai and Mano needed some time alone. Takagi tells Nishikata that he was blushing all day today, and Nishikata denies this. She then tells Nishikata that he gets so shy in these situations, and Nishikata denies this as he gets up to leave the change room, until Takagi states that the reason is because he is getting embarrassed, to which Nishikata also denies. Nishikata asks if that's what it looked like, clearly trying to deny the idea, before Takagi accurately predicts his real reason, that being that he is too embarrassed to tandem ride with her. He denies this outright, but when Takagi asks if he can't do it, he denies that too, given that he is too embarrassed by an indirect kiss to take any of hers. Nishikata denies this but opens the juice and drinks it anyway. However, he decides that she couldn't have after he denies a request to tandem ride to school, and denying Takagi's claim that he is just embarrassed. But he doesn't. He says yes as he sheepishly hands the handkerchief to Takagi. This is the moment that I no longer regretted calling Takagi-san my favourite anime of all time. As much as I love Tsuredure Children, a lot of the characters end the series the same way they started it. Not that there isn't any progression, but compared to Takagi-san, there is very little. As Takagi takes the handkerchief from Nishikata, she feels something different about it. She goes to open it up, but Nishikata looks on super nervously. When she looks at him, he looks away with a smile on his face and says that he is glad. When Takagi asks about what, he says that he's glad that he was able to return her handkerchief and that they're sitting next to each other again. He gets caught on that second point, trying to explain himself, kind of like what he did in Critical Hit, except this time there is much less shame, no real excuse, and no real need for one. Takagi smiles at him and says she is looking forward to it. Nishikata realizes the teasing he will need to endure until the next seat change and looks a little nervous, but still nods and agrees. Now this is not where the story ends, but this is where I will be going into the analytical part of this video. First of all, the manga comparison. There are a few stories throughout the anime that add to the stories they are adapting, and these changes are almost always for the better. I already mentioned the entire studying scene from Room, but there are also smaller things, like Nishikata nervously looking for other people to further display his discomfort in Empty Can, or adding I love you to Takagi's forgotten phrases in Umbrella. But this is the kind of adaptation that I really genuinely respect, the kind that completely recontextualizes the story and makes it all the better. Can you imagine if I said that seating arrangement was just your bog standard story, no more relevant to the overall plot than Who is Taller or English translation? Well, it essentially is in the manga. But in the anime, it's the big finale that shows just how far our characters have come. Speaking of which, this is Nishikata's last bout of character growth for the season. Had seating arrangement happened any sooner, and he probably would have been glad to get a break from Takagi during school. But by this point in the story, the two of them are so close that he can no longer imagine being apart. Obviously, eventually they're going to have to learn to be apart, but not while they can help it. Not right now. Not only did Nishikata decide he still wanted to sit with Takagi, but he also acted on it. He actively tried to get the seat next to her, and when he failed, he became upset. That leads me on to my next point. The fact that he makes the same pose as Mano after failing to get a seat next to Takagi is very telling. Let me just remind you that Mano takes her relationship with Takai very seriously, and very much wants it to work out. So just think about that. Imagine the disappointment of a teenage girl who doesn't get to sit next to her boyfriend, and now think about how Nishikata is just as upset about not being able to sit next to Takagi. And lastly, we need to talk about Takagi. This is a perfect example of how to really make a moment hit home. We've only seen Takagi upset a handful of times in this show, and never really to this degree. Most of the show she is smiling or laughing, so seeing her this sad just really gets to you. It's a perfect way to present to the audience just how serious this situation is, and they absolutely earn it. So now, we cut to Takagi's bedroom at night. She is laying in bed looking at the handkerchief that Nishikata had returned to her. She unfolds it and a piece of paper falls out and lands on her. She opens up the paper and sees a note. Dear Takagi, thank you. From Nishikata. As far as the anime is concerned, this is the first time Nishikata's written a note for Takagi, and she is so happy to receive it that this happens.
My love is forever. あなたと出会った頃のように季節が変わってもきっと色あせないはずだよ.
And that's a wrap, not just for this analysis, but the whole series, unless the season 2 comes out, of course. In particular, I'd like to thank Epsilus Zero, Jerry Ook, Dark Flame Master, XX Nemesis XX, Party Force, Daniel Newville, JMG Productions, Average Teen Cuba, Jason Marcosio, Elite, Linus Motor, Terrell Roke, Kulfdra Legend, Monjish Bhattacharya, Dumbus, Arn Trung, Swag, Wave TGM, Can't Stop the Bacon, Justin Barnes, Duncan Bones, Lucy Dragneil, Tung Sten, Quality Internet Trash, and Hippo202. Without you guys, this series would have been 3 episodes long and would have ended a very long time ago. I have an extra special thank you for Epsilus Zero, who has time and time again come to my aid for translation help. Thank you for helping me to make some of the most interesting points. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to the fine folks at Tsundere.services for translating, typesetting, cleaning up, and releasing fan subs for the Takagi-san manga. Thanks to your efforts, we are all able to read some of our favourite manga, and I have been able to compare this series to its source material. Lastly, I want to thank all of you for watching. This has been one hell of a ride, and I hope you will join me for my next project, whatever it may be. But until then, I will see you next time.